The moving truck hadn't even finished backing into my driveway when the HOA president called 911 on me, screaming that I was trespassing in my own house. And 3 hours later, that same woman, Bethany Cromwell, would discover I didn't just own the house she tried to kick me out of. I owned 14 more homes on our street, including hers. And the moment her face changed when she realized she had called the cops on her own landlord was the kind of poetic justice I didn't think existed outside movies. I didn't move here to start a war. I moved here because I was tired. Tired in the way that sinks into your bones. My wife Sarah had passed away 2 years earlier from a sudden brain aneurysm, and after 15 years in the Silicon Valley pressure cooker, I just needed to breathe again. So when I found this old lake house tucked at the edge of waterfront estates, a quiet, upscale, too-perfect neighborhood, I thought it was my ticket to healing, or at least a place to sit still long enough to figure out who I was without her. But the moment my foot hit the driveway, I learned I hadn't moved into a peaceful lakeside community. I had stepped straight into a dictatorship disguised as suburbia. Bethany Cromwell marched toward me like she owned the asphalt under her shoes. High-end tennis outfit, platinum hair pulled tight enough to warp her skull clipboard in hand, like she was about to cite me for existing. "You can't park that truck here," she barked before she even reached my property line. "This is a violation of community standards. I need to see your authorization papers immediately." Authorization papers. For my own home. I hadn't even opened the box labeled Sarah's books, and already this woman was acting like I was breaking into Fort Knox. I tried staying polite. God knows I tried. I introduced myself, explained I'd closed on the house yesterday, even offered to show her the damn deed on my phone. She leaned back like my phone might contaminate her. "That's impossible," she snapped. "This house belongs to the Garrison estate, and they would never sell to someone like you. Someone like me." Jeans faded MIT shirt, a face that hadn't slept well in 2 years. I wasn't sure what category she was filing me under, but I could tell she didn't like it. I told her again calmly that I was the owner. She stared me down for 3 full seconds, lifted her phone like she was performing on Broadway, and deliberately dialed 911 while maintaining eye contact. I swear she even angled her body so the entire neighborhood could watch the show. Within 12 minutes, a patrol car rolled up. The officer Hutchinson stepped out with the heavy sigh of a man who knew exactly what kind of misery he was walking into. He checked my ID, checked my house documents, checked Bethany's hysterical complaints, and finally told her point blank that I was the legal owner and she needed to stop filing false reports. She did not take that well. She puffed up like a furious flamingo and hissed, "Fine. But as HOA president, I will be monitoring you. All of your violations, every move you make." Then she spun on her heel and stormed off toward the gaudy Mediterranean mansion across the street, the one that looked like it was designed by someone who'd eaten too much Pinterest. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. By the next morning, my front door was plastered with fluorescent orange violation notices. My garbage cans were visible from the street. My grass was 1/4 inch too long. The rose bushes planted by the previous owner were unapproved vegetation. I got fined for possible suspicious activity due to excessive quietness. I'm not joking. She fined me for not making enough noise. I started to realize this wasn't just a power trip. This was a regime. Neighbors whispered apologies to me. Pete, the guy next door, told me she once fined a family $3,000 because she measured their lawn and it was 1/2 inch off her standard. Another family's mailbox was 2 inches too close to the street, $800 fine. She used her judge brother-in-law to intimidate people. She manipulated elections. She scared off anyone who tried to run against her. And for a moment, just one, I felt something heavy lodge inside me. Like I'd made a mistake moving here. Like I'd dragged my grief into another battleground when all I wanted was peace. I sat in the half-unpacked living room that night, surrounded by Sarah's books and memories I wasn't ready to face, and I wondered if I should just leave. Sell the house, walk away, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere without a woman who treated a clipboard like a weapon. But then, something shifted. Pete came over the next day with a folder, thick, battered, practically bulging with documents, photos, testimonies, police reports. "This is what we've been dealing with for years," he said, dropping it on my table. "We've tried everything. Nobody's ever stood up to her. Maybe you can." And when I opened that folder, what I felt wasn't exhaustion, it was anger. Anger I hadn't felt since the day Sarah died. Anger that made me sit up straighter, breathe deeper, and actually think instead of just survive. Because Bethany didn't know something I had deliberately kept quiet, the Garrison house wasn't the first property I'd bought in waterfront estates. And in the weeks leading up to my move, I had quietly acquired 13 more, including rental homes, vacation homes, houses stuck in probate, even a few lots. Through shell companies, trusts, and private deals, I owned most of the block before I ever set foot in it, including the trust that held Bethany's mansion. She had no idea the ground beneath her designer heels was already mine. 2 days later, she arrived at my door with 4 HOA board members in tow, all wearing outfits that screamed country club cosplay. She waved a fake bylaw in my face, claiming she had the right to inspect my home following a leadership approval protocol. The paper still smelled like fresh printer ink. I refused politely. Asked for the real state-filed bylaws. She sputtered something about non-compliance fines. I told her the property predated the HOA and wasn't under her authority. She went silent. Like silent. The kind of silence where you could practically hear her worldview collapsing. And then things escalated. She held an emergency HOA meeting in her driveway, dragged out a portable microphone, and announced that I was a security threat and she was instituting extreme new rules. Moving trucks now required a $500 deposit. Improvements required her personal approval. Background checks were mandatory for all new residents. One neighbor finally shouted, "This is illegal," and she threatened his deck measurements until he shut up. But then she made her biggest mistake. She tried to rally the neighborhood to force me out. She held another meeting this time in broad daylight, demanding every homeowner pay a special assessment of $5,000 to start legal action against me. People gasped. Richard, a guy who'd been quiet until then, finally stood up for himself. "You can't just charge us $5,000 because you don't like someone," he yelled. And that's when I stepped forward, holding the stack of bogus violation notices I'd collected like wilted orange confetti. "These aren't legal," I told her loud enough for the whole neighborhood. "This property isn't under your jurisdiction. And also, you might want to explain to everyone why you've been collecting HOA fees from houses that were never legally part of the HOA. The crowd shifted. Whispers. Phones coming out. People checking property records on the spot. I added 15 properties total, for 11 years, roughly $800,000. The silence that followed could have cracked pavement. Her treasurer, Harold, the poor man who looked like he'd aged 20 years since breakfast, finally broke. "Bethany," he said quietly, "we need to check the records." She shrieked something unintelligible and stormed off, but the damage was done. Neighbors didn't disperse. They stayed talking, comparing notes. It was the first crack in her kingdom. And then came the moment everything flipped. She showed up at my door the next morning with a fake cease and desist order, barely held together by the cheap stapler she probably bought just for dramatic effect. She tried to threaten me with legal action unless I paid thousands in made-up fines. I handed her an envelope in return, one that informed her that the Cromwell Family Trust, the trust that owned her mansion, now had a new trustee. My company. Her face went blank, then pale, then blotchy. She whispered, "No, Harold handles everything. He wouldn't sign something like—" I just shrugged. "You should ask him." 30 minutes later, his car peeled out of their driveway like he was fleeing a crime scene. Word spread fast. By noon, the entire community knew something massive was coming, and that night the community center was packed to the walls for an official HOA meeting. Bethany stepped up to the podium, makeup smudged hair, unraveling voice, trembling. "This man," she began, pointing at me like I was a war criminal, "has fraudulently taken control of our neighborhood." "Stop," Harold said suddenly, loudly. And the room froze. Bethany's husband had never in 11 years spoken against her. But now he stood up, eyes red, hands shaking. "There was no fraud. I signed the papers. We're broke because of your lawsuits. The HOA is deeply in debt. Jackson didn't trick us. You did." She stared at him like he'd slapped her. He continued, "Your reign is over." And that was when everything erupted at once. People shouting for financial records, demanding she resign, accusing her of intimidation and extortion. I stepped forward and connected my attorney's laptop to the projector. "Here's where your HOA fees actually went," I said. The screen lit up with numbers that made people gasp aloud. Nearly $2 million collected, less than $200,000 spent on maintenance, hundreds of thousands funneled into administrative expenses tied to Bethany, payments to friends, lawyers, personal expenses, vacations disguised as board retreats. Someone yelled, "She stole from us." Someone else shouted, "Arrest her." And then the doors opened, and Officer Hutchinson walked in. "Mrs. Cromwell," he said, finally, sounding like justice felt good. "For once you need to come with me for questioning regarding suspected embezzlement and fraud." Bethany tried to back away. She tried to talk. She tried to threaten me, the board, the officer, everyone. But within seconds her wrists were cuffed. Her microphone clattered to the floor, and she was escorted out the door, still screaming that she was the victim. And just like that, it was over. No applause, no celebration, just a neighborhood staring at the empty podium where their tyrant had stood for more than a decade. A quiet, heavy silence, the kind that settles when fear finally leaves a room. And me, I just stood there watching the community realize they were finally free. Sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free, it pulls the entire HOA down with it.